Hello everyone, I'm Annan, and today I'm going to show you the time-lapse build of my new Longshot modification, which I named the Bloody Katana. To start, I disassembled the blaster and gutted all the internals to get it prepped for sanding and painting. Speaking of sanding, I sanded the blaster shells and stock pieces with 22 grit sandpaper, which took quite a while to do so. Once it was sanded, I used a Rust-Oleum white primer to paint the outside and inside of the shells and pieces. Now on to the unique part of the build, the blood splatter. To achieve a more sporadic splatter effect on the shell, I poured red enamel paint into a CPVC barrel, which had a piece of tissue to keep the paint from leaking out from the back. Then I hooked the barrel up to my Spectre mod, which has an integrated Titan tank in it, and I shoot the paint out into the blaster, like so. And this technique is based on Bobololo's splatter painting video, so if you want to see his more detailed tutorial, click on the card above to check out his video.
Shoot right here, and beautiful. Okay, right here. Top. Perfect. There we go. Perfect. And oh, whoops. All right. And perfect. Perfect.
After that, I applied smaller blood spatter details on the shells by putting some paint on a toothbrush and running my finger through the bristles to get more coverage on the blank areas of the shells. After the details had been applied, I finished it up with a Rust-Oleum satin clear coat. Now on to the internals. I'm currently installing the Longshot pusher breech kit, printed in red and sold by foamdemic on Etsy, with the parts originally designed by Performance Mods. I first installed the smaller 3D printed pieces and glued them to the shells. For the main upgrade spring, I measured and cut 6 inches of K25 spring, and I put it on a 3D printed spring rest and screwed it down to 3D printed plunger head, which I added foam padding on top. Next, I decided to use the plastic worker plunger tube that came with the plunger rod I'm using, due to it having a more consistent inner diameter, but I later rejected it and went with the stock plunger tube instead. The bolt sled that you see is the worker metal bolt sled that I got in red to match the build. And I have that attached to the 3D printed skinny breech, which will allow you to insert the magazine when the breech is in the closed position. Anyway, I'm currently gluing the foot-long 17/32 brass barrel to the 3D printed dart guide and barrel shroud. With the barrel installed, I decided to test the blaster by giving the plunger tube and breech some lube, as well as replacing the K25 spring with a weaker spring to not stress the internals during testing.
yeah.
With the breech functioning perfectly, I decided to put the blaster back together by screwing down the remaining pieces in the shell, putting back the K25 spring in the plunger assembly, and lubing up the bolt sled and 3D printed catch.
A little dark here. Alright, well, it's fire. It did.
I finished reassembling the blaster and putting the stock pieces back on, which are now reinforced with interior 3D printed parts that prevent the stock from collapsing. Lastly, I install a black worker 3D printed pump grip to make priming back the K25 spring much more comfortable and easier. Now with the blaster complete, let's talk Chrono Numbers. With Worker Gen 3 darts and the AC Foamworks Scar Barrel attached, the blaster got a high of 229, a low of 197, and an average of 217 feet per second. I believe that the wide range is because I use decent quality darts and even some that have been fired out of my flywheel blasters. So bear in mind that this blaster can have better consistency with newer quality darts. Overall, I'm very happy how this blaster turned out. My inspiration for the blood splatter paint job was from Bobololo's splatter painting video I mentioned, Inspector Nerf's S.p.L.a.t Bloody Katana, as well as my S.p.L.a.t Longshot build that I did a long time ago. I also want to give a shout out to Performance Mods for originally designing the parts and foamdemic for printing and selling it as a kit. The print quality on the parts is some of the best I've ever seen and they have great customer service. So link in the description box to their Etsy page as well as links to where I got the rest of the mod parts that I used. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and happy modding.